So as I as I talk to you and I get more information about the what's going on the ground in Venezuela, I must say it is awfully depressing. It just doesn't seem like anything good is going to come out of this. What do you like? I mean, just based on your knowledge as someone who knows a lot more about it than me, what do you think is going to happen going forward?
I'm not really in the business of fortune telling, but um, if there's no intervention, and hopefully there's not, um, it's very likely Maduro will stay in power for a few more years. I think the military will end up like deposing him, and they'll go into like maybe a military rule or a coalition based rule. Um, I'm of the opinion that if the opposition wants to win, they have to change the message and actually campaign at least on like say like a Chicago Boys Chilean model type of platform, or they should look at what the Eastern European countries did um, during the collapse of the Soviet Union to essentially peacefully overthrow their rulers. In one article from Mises, I actually argued for separatism through secession, especially in the western regions of the state of Táchira, where my father was born, or the state of Zulia. I'm a big advocate of breaking up bloated nation states, and I think Venezuela would be a um, good staging ground for that because um, I think that a more reasonable alternative would be to have a more market-based Venezuela and then have like the more socialist-based Venezuela. Ideally, that would be done organically and through a grassroots movement of people in those regions because those regions are not as culturally similar as the central Venezuela and Caracas, the capital.
Right. Do you think, because you brought up the Chilean example, would maybe a best case scenario, like a plausible best case scenario, be some type of Pinochet type character taking over the country?
I go about this. Um, I've actually gone about this in a blog post today that I made. I don't see a Pinochet scenario in Venezuela, and here's why. Um, Pinochet, I think, was kind of a fluke if you think about it. The entire circumstances of the Chilean coup, all that, were very strange because Salvador Allende, the Marxist leader who won, he won with only like a plurality of the vote. I think like 36 or 37% of the vote. Chile is a rule of law country for the most part, meaning that if any type of crisis like emerges, economic or political, there is a historical tendency for the military to step in and bring some order to the country. And the Chicago Boys were already well established in the 60s before Pinochet came into the picture. So it was a matter of them lobbying the government during Pinochet to get the reforms on board. And it was just like a perfect storm of factors that I just don't see in Venezuela because since then, Pinochet and the Chicago Boys have been completely demonized
Yeah.
by the hard left, the globalist left, and the centrists across the board. A fun fact: a lot of Chileans during the Pinochet regime, they they moved to Venezuela when Venezuela was still politically and economically stable, and they gained refuge there. And a lot of the Venezuelan opposition to this day, they're very anti-dictator. They don't like dictatorships, and they see all dictatorships as fascist, including Maduro as well. So it's just a very hard sell. Cultural Marxism has become very ingrained globally. Another scenario I think that is more viable, though, is if Venezuela has a red pill moment like Brazil did with Jair Bolsonaro, where Bolsonaro, he does have a Chicago dual influence advisor at his side in Paulo Guedes, but that's going to take a while in Venezuela because a lot of these type of dissident right movements or any type of free market movements are still very fringe in the country. It's a country that's been under some form of progressive rule for the past 50 years. Culture dies hard, so it's going to take some time for it to build up. But I think Brazil does have the most viable model in a democratic sense for Venezuela and other Latin American countries to move forward.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and it is unbelievable, even as you say that, how much Pinochet and the Chicago Boys have been demonized. I mean, even just as we talk about them now, when you talk about it, it's like a very controversial subject to say anything positive about what they were able to do for the people of Chile. And yet, you see lots of people here in the mainstream media on the left, like the Bernie Sanders types, who will say positive things about like the Castro brothers. Even Barack Obama, the last president, had lots of positive things to say about them, and that's not considered controversial at all. And it's really amazing if you look at what they delivered for their people. And also just the level of human rights abuses. Like I'm not defending everything Pinochet did. I think he definitely did some bad things, but overall, there's no question he delivered more for his people than Fidel Castro ever did.
Yeah, it's true. The Pinochet government really, when you look at it, it is kind of a historical aberration because a lot of right-wing dictatorships in Latin America just evolved into like banana republic tyrannies. Um, Thankfully, he had the Chicago boys that were thinking in the long term about the country's future, and they built a constitution that actually ultimately forced Pinochet out through a plebiscite. Um, the key to that equation is long-term thinking, something that's completely exited the building in Venezuela. And yeah, back to your point on Fidel Castro and other leftist leaders, there's a massive double standard when it comes to the analysis of tyrants and stuff like that. Anyone that's labeled a fascist or right-wing authoritarian is automatically demonized, while Castro, Stalin, Lenin, um, Mao, what have you, they are all given a pass, and it just goes to show how dominant the progressive narrative has become. And in fact, I'd go as far as to say that even with the Cold War, the main victors of the Cold War have been the Menshevik vegetarian left, the social democratic left, because their narratives ultimately won out. They saw the hardline communists as authoritarian, fascist, anti-union, instead of being complete tyrants that destroyed private property, that destroyed markets. And to this day, we see it now as the left has pivoted to the corporate boardroom, through woke capital, and through the complete capture of cultural institutions. So we're still fighting a leftist narrative to this day.
Yeah. Well, is that part, you've touched on that, the capture of these cultural institutions. Do you think that is the main reason why people, it seems like in these South American countries and in other countries around the world, are unable or unwilling to just reject socialism? I mean, if you just, from the perspective that I have, which is, like the Rothbardian libertarian perspective, it just seems so obvious at this point that, I mean, all the experiments have been run. It seems so obvious that you would want to reject this and you would look to where people have had better lives and better success. Is it as simple as the propaganda, the social institutions? Do you think, why the people of, say, Venezuela or Cuba, for that example? Because it's still shocking to me how many of them rally around their own governments.
Well, it's definitely a cultural environment. Traditional Marxism thrives in the third world because you have really corrupt, rich elites that are easy to rally against. And these cultures don't have property rights in place. And it doesn't help that a lot of the opposition, they're educated in Western institutions where there are brainwashed into adopting cultural Marxism, Stalinism, or any other variant of statism, Keynesianism, all that. And when they come back to their countries, it's just that the people don't have many options. And it doesn't help either that in Latin American countries, the Catholic Church has been completely consumed by liberation theology. So it's like across the board, you have a complete socialist takeover of institutions and politicians. Like I've mentioned before, I think in the West it's slightly different because of the fact that the biggest PC enforcers are woke capital, big tech, and other institutions. But I think what we've seen the left done very cleverly in the past years or so is played the long game by co-opting institutions and even getting in bed with certain corporate actors, because I think that the past 100 years has shown that the really Stalinist model or just like the Garrison state socialist model will just completely implode within a matter of years. And I think that leftist elites have gotten a lot more clever these days. Venezuela really is just one of the last vestige of this antiquated model, just like Cuba and North Korea. But I do think there are lessons to be learned in the West from it.
Well, what would those lessons be?
That I think interventionism of all forms should be categorically rejected. I think that the United States, it's not going to be the next Venezuela, but it will still face problems because of the fact that the demographics, the welfare state's unsustainable. Now that boomers are retiring, and once the tail end boomers retire, you'll start seeing some really nasty fiscal reversals and other unpleasant economic developments. That's why I think that we should stress decentralization, private property, institutional competition, voluntary association above all else. We don't have to always fearmonger and say, oh, we're going to become Venezuela, but we also have to realize, too, that tyranny can come in a lot of forms, and we're letting our culture being taken over by progressives, and we simply don't have a very firm opposition right now that could counter that. Thankfully, we do have some technologies like Bitcoin, defense distributed, and whatnot to stem the tide and actually build the foundations for a free society. But I think we should always remember that private property is the foundation of civilization, and we should be absolutely proud of it and defend it at all costs.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I'm with you. Although I will say sometimes, and maybe this talking about Venezuela particularly, it is just kind of depressing to see where this stuff can go. And I agree with you that I don't think that the United States of America is going to become Venezuela tomorrow. But I think you're absolutely right that the economic realities of maintaining the national debt that we have, having the unfunded liabilities and the entitlement programs that we have, this has to come home to roost, and it's coming home pretty soon. This isn't our great grandchildren's lifetime. We're all, God willing, neither of us get hit by a bus or killed by a deep state agent in the next couple years. We're all going to see this happen. But when you talk about the progressives taking over the social institutions, I mean, that has just been completely lost. I don't even know how we would begin to go about reversing that trend. Do you think that's even plausible?
I honestly don't know, man, because this is a different animal. The left, it used to be that they were just stuck in their university classes, talking about all their freak show ideas, but now you've got corporations kowtowing and becoming the enforcers. I think this does bring up a good point that Tom Woods talks about in his email list. A lot of libertarians and free marketers probably need to start getting side hustles and becoming financially independent. Now it's not just like a optional career choice that will optimize your financial status. It's probably a necessity in this day and age of hardcore thought policing being carried out by social media, by all these banks and whatnot now that are debanking controversial figures. You have to adapt. The left has adapted. I don't think that bars us from adapting. We can adapt. We talk about the market and stuff like that. It's all about adaptation and adjusting to our new environment. So we just need to experiment and take risks.
Yeah, things certainly have changed in that in that area, and the left definitely is adapting. I mean, you can criticize them for all of their economic policies and social policies, being kind of crazy and you know having awful results. But you really do have to tip your hat to them that they really have figured out a way to adapt to the world in 2019. Now, you were, I believe, like me, you were somebody who was very influenced by the Ron Paul campaign in 2008. Is that's correct?
Yes, I got into this movement around 2007.
Yeah, so same with me. I mean, I don't know if I would say I got into the movement, but I was first introduced to these ideas in 2007 when I saw Ron Paul, and then it took me a couple years of studying before I was really like sold on it. But it really is just I'm just thinking this as you're saying to me. It really is amazing how much the situation on the ground has changed since then, because in around 2007, 2008, and then even to 2009, 2010, all the way up to the 2012 run, it felt to me like we really owned the internet. Like we were the libertarians were kind of on the cutting edge of this, where Ron Paul would win all the internet polls and we would be communicating and sharing our ideas on the internet. And you fast forward to 2019 and like anybody who doesn't fit the as Tom Woods would say, the 3x5 index card of allowable opinion is now getting strikes on their social media channel and kicked off, and you got all types of people coming at you. And I guess we need to, as you were saying before, we need to kind of adapt to the next phase of this.
Yeah, I mean, the internet does offer a lot of freedom in certain regards. It's a matter of exploiting whatever niches we can find there. There's a lot of very innovative people in the tech space, in the crypto space, that are finding ways to battle this censorship and battle this thought policing. I think it's a matter of years. So we just need to play the long game and not fall for the siren song of statism to solve these problems, and just continue to build up our social networks and stick together.
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you on that, and luckily there are still a lot of a lot of great people who still have voices online, and of course the one that I probably love the most is the Mises Institute, and that, as I said at the beginning, we had a chance to have some great conversations there last year, and I look forward to hanging out with you there